All right, I'm Jeff Nyquist, and this is another edition of Friends and Enemies. We are going to be discussing the assassination attempt on Donald Trump yesterday, which was July 13th, 2024, at Butler, Pennsylvania. The shooter was Thomas Matthew Crooks. And it's interesting. I'm Jeff Nyquist, and my co host Alex Benesch is in Germany. We've been analyzing the data on the shooting. And I would say this: in my misspent youth, I did bodyguarding work and I did training with firearms. And it seems to me that this shooter was not well trained, that this shot at 130 yards from the roof of a structure to Trump's right. He grazed Trump on Trump's right. And when you fire firearms, there is a tendency with the trigger pull, even with a rifle, and at that distance, your natural motion in your hand pulls a little bit to your left, to the shooter's left. It's very much with a hard trigger pull on a
It's a beginner
on
mistake.
a um, on a revolver, right? And so what you train in a smooth trigger pull is not to jerk your hand at all. Well, he didn't have to jerk more than a millimeter at 130 yards to just miss. He had the center mass right. He had the up and down. See, because he grazed Trump right here, he was right the center of the eye. He had the center. Why was he off by this much? He was an amateur. A professional would not have missed, or a trained marksman would not have missed. This is a 20-year-old kid. He it seems to me he just got a
Yeah.
rifle. He didn't really have any real training. He probably didn't have a instruction by somebody who knew what they were doing, and that's why he missed. And of course, I haven't seen the latest report, but he missed and killed somebody behind Trump,
Hmm.
killed a civilian, at least one, and maybe injured other people. You can give me the latest on that, but it's pretty obvious this guy was an amateur. And to crawl onto a building, I mean, you know how Secret Service usually watches all the buildings, and they got snipers. He should have known. By the way, he should have been shot before he got a shot off. He should have been shot dead, but he
Yeah.
wasn't.
There should have been
And
people
I just,
on that building. I mean, if you saw the
yeah,
map, there's the
yeah.
stage area. There's a building or a group of buildings behind it with the police snipers on there, and then
Mhm.
there's this other building where police officers should also have been staged. And from that other building, the shooter. That's where the shooter was, but why wasn't police on that building? And also, you can
Well,
tell that the roof was almost completely white. It's a very light color, so anybody
mhm.
who enters this roof is clearly visible. And if we compare this guy, and I've seen the latest photos, and he wears glasses, or he wore glasses. This is a different kind of person than Lee Harvey Oswald, right? Because Oswald, he had military training.
Mhm.
Decades ago,
He knew
he
firearms. Yeah, he
yeah
knew
he
them very well.
he was Oswald was a pretty good shot, and according to the latest data and latest research, uh, Oswald had about 8 seconds, or maybe more than 8 seconds, to fire these shots
Which
in
is
rapid
longer than they
succession.
had previously thought.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and this is exactly where some of these sensationalist authors and truthers, they try to shorten that time span to make it seem implausible and impossible. They said 3 seconds, 4 seconds, but now we know it's more like 8 seconds or more. So if you're an experienced shooter, and the target is either still or moving in a line away from you, you can make those shots and you can hit a president if you get into that position. So, but these two people are clearly different. So I have assembled all kinds of notes and have sorted it according to different aspects of the case. And we're also going to be talking about the
Mhm.
whole background. Why Trump? Why now? Who is attached to Trump? What could the possible motives be? And what must have gone through the shooter's mind, or maybe through the minds of people who may have been attached to the shooter. And this has to be done professionally, because we've seen that with the JFK thing. I recommend everybody to check out an early episode of this show, Friends and Enemies. I think I called it KGB versus JFK, We had a committed communist using a Marxist-Leninist terrorism strategy. He was not a lone nut. He was not alone. He had contacts. He was in the Soviet Union. He was probably recruited by the KGB. Had a KGB plant wife.
He was
And
connected to the DGI, the Cuban Intelligence Service. He had met
yes,
DGI officers in the Soviet Union in Minsk,
and he
and
was
one of them that he had met in the Soviet Union flew to Dallas that day from Havana to Mexico, from Mexico to Dallas, and then back again after the shooting. So there's some very curious things about the JFK
yeah, and we
assassination.
we
But
can
here,
we could
yeah,
tell how people can distort a case, and nowadays with the internet, the distortions can
yeah,
happen even faster. The moment this event happens, people are
right.
going to start spinning stories. The Russians are going to get involved, causing more chaos with false leads and false narratives. So we want to just
But this
untangle this
20
whole thing.
yeah, but this 20-year-old Thomas Crooks, he was this is just a kind of impressionistic thing. He was probably a CNN watcher who also listened to President Biden saying over and over again that Trump was a threat to democracy. Biden has actually said that Trump is planning a bloodbath, and you can find the quotes. I've heard him say it more than once, that Trump is planning a bloodbath if he doesn't get his way and win the election. And this is for Biden to have said that. If any young person, and young people can be very naive about political statements and politicians, and he's listening to CNN, who knows what messages he's getting, who knows what he heard in school, if he's registered in a junior college, or what kind of indoctrination he's getting. They're reporting now that he's a registered Republican. Why would a registered Republican shoot
Yeah.
Trump?
Now,
Right?
of course,
It
there's
doesn't make any sense. But he obviously, these messages influenced him, and it was a suicide. It was stupid. I mean, think about how poorly informed this kid was. To think that he could climb up, he should have been shot before he even got a shot off. It was the fact that the
yeah.
security detail, the Secret Service is obviously not up to the job they used to perform, the way they used to perform, because that building they would have had eyes on. They would have seen the guy crawling before that guy the BBC interviewed was waving, hey, look over there, there's a guy crawling
Yeah.
up there with a rifle. I mean, it's pretty, but they did this, to the Secret Service's credit, they did notice him. Of course, he got a few shots off, maybe, I don't know how many shots he got off, at least one we know of. And then there was, did you see the shot that killed him, the shooter? Did you see the footage of the shooter that killed him?
Yeah, I've seen the clip.
The shooter's on a building himself. He's on the peak of a building with his rifle set on the peak. Now, I don't know if he climbed up there rapidly to get a shot and didn't get there in time to prevent a shot from the shooter. I'm not sure of that. I expect that we're going to know, but that's probably what happened. He probably was not positioned there because he would have been able to shoot the shooter before the shot came off, but he got into position and he killed this guy. Shot him in the head, it looks like. And I saw there's a photograph of the shooter when they turned him over on the roof of his face, and it does match the picture on the
And
roof.
we know
It
by
matches
now
this guy.
we know by now
Yeah.
that Oswald was a cynical bastard. He didn't exactly care that Kennedy was president. He knew that, or he said that on more than one occasion, that the system could replace Kennedy at any time, but
Yeah,
he
in
wanted to
fact,
do it. He wanted to
yeah,
do
in
it to
fact,
create that chaos, to get the ball rolling, and to become famous, and then to go to either
right.
back to the Soviet Union or go to Cuba and be a hero for the rest of his life and be
Well,
somebody.
that's the thing, is that Oswald had a very intelligent plan, and he had a getaway plan, and he did it in such a clever way. He actually managed to escape the school book depository building from which he fired, and he almost got away. If he hadn't, if police officer Tippett
He wanted to
hadn't
get on a
spotted
bus,
something
go to
suspicious,
Mexico, get to the embassy, and
right?
get a plane ticket to Cuba.
I mean, Tippett gave his life noticing something. We don't know what this officer noticed, but he noticed something suspicious about Oswald, pulled over his cruisers, got out to question Oswald, and Oswald shot him dead and then ran away. And if the guy across the street from the theater hadn't seen Oswald run into the theater without paying, when he was hearing the sirens, he wouldn't have known to call the police to say, hey, somebody ran into that theater without
Yeah.
paying. Maybe it's the guy you're looking for. And of course, the police surrounded the building and went in and they found Oswald in there and they arrested him. Oswald tried to shoot another police officer in there. So I think that Oswald really was, in a way, was lucky in getting away, but unlucky getting away at first, but unlucky ultimately in getting away. This guy didn't even have an escape plan. He was going to shoot from a building that should have had eyes on. He should have known that he would have been killed immediately. It was just amazing that he got a shot off. Of course, then he was killed.
Yeah.
Um, and it's by the way, there's egg all over the face of the Secret Service, because for a building within 130 yards of where Trump was speaking, they should have had eyes on. They should have had that cleared. They should have had people doing advance work to see if anybody was checking out the site in advance, because this guy had to go to this site. They had to know when they announced that the event was there. This guy had to go there and look at where he would have done this from, right? He would have checked it out. He would have
Yeah.
had to been thinking
I mean,
about it for
yeah,
quite
I
a
mean,
while.
it's like, so we're trying to reconstruct a possible motive here. He may have been crazy. He may have been a schizo. He may have, thought he was a Republican one day, and then the next day he thought he was a leftist or whatever. He may have been crazy, but he may have had either an Oswald type strategy of creating a provocation, hoping that it would destabilize the country, it would motivate others to do something stupid and then have a civil war. Maybe that was a strategy, or maybe maybe he truly believed that Trump was going to be a dictator day one. He's going to be the new Hitler, the new Mussolini, as some people have claimed. And also recently we saw the publication of Project 2025, which is this large strategy plan from the Heritage Foundation, which you could call anti-communism. The whole program is anti-communism. So they wanted to clean the state from all the wokies and the useless bureaucracy and everything. So maybe that was the motive. He may have thought by taking out Trump, he was going to take out the head of the conspiracy. And that may have been the case, because that has been built up by the left. This panic, this insane panic that it's the last chance for America if Trump disappears forever. There's multiple options here.
That look, Crooks, it's obvious to me from the way he carried out the assassination attempt that he was not a very clear thinking person.
Or you wanted to get
Trump
caught.
is already right. I mean, Trump has already been president, so how much of a threat could he be? What is another 4 years of the same? He was president before. He didn't create a dictatorship. But the whole way that this, I mean, he's very young. The whole way he carried it out showed a lack of real steady, clear thinking. There's not very much, he did not put that much thought into it. And I don't think, therefore, he put very much thought into his worldview, into his political views. Oswald had thought through communism. He'd read Marx. He'd been in the Soviet Union. He obviously, I mean, Oswald was no genius, but Oswald had spent a lot of time and had committed himself to a communist course, so much so that he went to the Soviet Union, so much so that he married a Russian woman, who
most likely
many people like Ian Pacepa, the former head of the Romanian intelligence service, was obviously a KGB. That Marina Oswald was obviously a KGB agent herself, because he noted that all female KGB agents had an Uncle Sasha, right? And she had an Uncle Alexander she supposedly lived with, an Uncle Sasha.
Yeah, and we don't get to know her mother. What was it? The mother is dead, or the father is dead, and she moved, and you can't trace anybody.
Yeah. Marina Oswald supposedly grew up in this far north town, Vorkuta, I think it was, it was Archangel, right? A little place outside of Archangel that nobody knows, nobody'd ever go. But she had the accent of a Leningrader, of a person from St. Petersburg. So the thing is that her whole background was a lie, the way she portrayed herself. But in this case, so Oswald has this extensive background and training and both in the Marine Corps, and they say he trained with a rifle in the Soviet Union. And he took a shot at an American general, a leader of the John Birch Society there in the Dallas Fort Worth
Walker,
area,
who wanted to become governor,
uh,
right? He wanted to become
General
the governor.
Walker, who wanted to was involved in politics, and of course, so Oswald had a very clear political motive as a communist socialist, as a Marxist, as he called himself. At one point saying that, well, I don't believe in the Soviet Union, but I believe in Marxism in one of his radio. But of course, he was really working with, he had a wife who was a likely KGB agent. He had lived in the Soviet Union. He had connections with the DGI. He had gone to Mexico City and met with DGI officials, intelligence officials, in the weeks preceding the assassination attempt. This kid, 20 years old, this kid, I suspect we're going to find out that he has a kind of uh, uh, muddled views, not very well read, not very thoughtful, but maybe passionate and maybe impressionable and influenced by somebody or the media or whatever to do this act and think of it as something heroic. Would be interesting to know what his friends would say about him. I imagine we're going to hear about that in the future. But again, the media, the mainstream media, like with Oswald, you pointed this out, isn't going to want to tell the story straight. That is, they're not going to want to report that this guy was influenced by this hyperbolic anti-Trump rhetoric that if you took it seriously and you were a serious person or thought of yourself as a serious person, not a clear thinking person, but serious in your motives, if he took that seriously, he
Yeah.
could have thought, well, nobody's stopping this monster. He's a future Hitler, which is the way they kind of describe Trump. Well, then he thought, well, he had a duty to
Hmm.
do this.
Yeah, and there have been many assassination attempts against Hitler, not only when he was in office, when Hitler became an actual dictator. There was some stuff before that, and there were also possibilities even to get to Hitler early on, even when he was an up and coming politician and people could sense that he was dangerous because he was always in his earlier political career in the 20s, Hitler was always frequenting the same spots, the same places where he ate lunch, and he always met with people at the same places. So, as you said, this is kind of the argument. Wouldn't you stop the new Hitler? So maybe that's what the shooter was thinking. But if the bullet had actually hit Trump, that would have changed history, but how much would have it changed history? This is kind of the core of the question here, because the Republican Party can do without Trump, and then we just saw the new agenda, this project 2025, which comes from the Heritage Foundation, which is very traditional. The Heritage had come up with all these ideas even back then for the administration of Ronald Reagan, and they usually get about 60% of their ideas either implemented or on the way. So Project 2025 would have lived on without Trump, and the party would have continued without Trump. So what was the shooter thinking? If he misses, this would help the Republicans, right? If he hits Trump, if he takes out Trump, this would also help the Republicans. So was he just uneducated? Was he not thinking straight? Did he not understand how the Republican Party works?
Yeah, well, it's not. The thing is that it's a very curious moment in history because you have the Democratic Party. Everything has been about Biden, Biden, Biden. This movie star, the former ER actor is now saying that
Clooney, yeah.
he's senile and he needs to go. And you've got this cabal around Obama. Obama apparently has stabbed Biden in the back. Has not had great love for Biden. Favored Hillary over Biden in 2016, and now there is this push to get rid of Biden, and Biden is just is only with over his cold dead hands, right? He's not going to part with the White House. He's not going to part with the presidency, and so you have a very interesting conflict in the Democratic Party, and that has just completely filled up the media. totally preoccupied the media until this event, which kind of takes Biden right out of the headlines and places Trump in the headlines, and it is a severe embarrassment to the administration, because it is, if this is true that Mayorkas denied additional security, and of course Robert Kennedy has been denied additional security, and this really troubled me at the time. It's, if I'm President Biden and I hear from my head of Homeland Security or the head of the Treasury Department that and I don't know, it used to be that I thought the Secret Service was under Treasury, but I'm reading now that it's Mayorkas denied additional security. If this is true, and Mayorkas, by the way, they want the Congress, the Republicans in Congress want to impeach him.
Yeah.
Right, for his incompetence and his bad behavior in the past. So this is really this is a political hot potato that the Democrats have been handed now. That's even more damaging to them.
Yeah,
And
because I mean,
I don't know if you noticed
the whole Homeland Security apparatus, the FBI, they now have to go into overdrive. They have to look at everybody who is a potential threat, who may do something next, because usually if something like that happens, other people feel motivated to also do something. And so now if the Biden administration, if the Biden administration now goes into overdrive, they may uncover some stuff that they don't want uncovered. All that crazy leftist hysteria, all these crazy, creepy leftist networks, so if they get super active now, it's going to be bad for the Biden administration, but if they don't do enough now, it also looks bad on them. So,
well, Elon Musk has come out, you probably noticed, and
Yeah.
said that now he's definitely going to support Trump because of this. And of course, I think it's a practically a matter of obligation when the president of the United States, Biden, says the other guy is going to create a bloodbath. I mean, and then he says he's this Mussolini-like fascist who's plotting to overthrow the Constitution and a threat to democracy. You got to support Trump on principle, because Trump's already been president. None of that happened, and that is incitement to violence against the opposition party, which is intimidation, which is gross intimidation and gross abuse of the freedom of speech of the president.
Yeah,
it's irresponsible,
and did you notice?
And it's tending towards civil war.
And did you notice this paradoxical situation where in the past you had an event like the Sandy Hook shooting, and then you had these creatures like Alex Jones saying this was completely fake, this was staged with actors, nobody died, or maybe somebody died, but the parents are fake and all that nonsense. Because apparently that's what the audience wanted to hear, that it's all fake. They choose a narrative which they like. They talk about a case how they want it to be, not how it really is. So of course the left became enraged. How dare these people misrepresent the Sandy Hook shooting? But now you see some leftists actually saying, well, maybe this was staged. Maybe this was all fake. This was a Republican conspiracy to sort of shoot at Trump to get him a boost in the election cycle. I mean, how crazy is that? So once
that's
it benefits,
totally crazy, because
once it benefits the left, they do the same crap.
The idea that you could bring a bullet right next to a guy's skull safely as a stunt is outrageously ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's just outrageous that anyone would propose that this was some kind of stunt. And I think that's going to be quickly, if that is persisting, that just shows the disintegration of our public mind, that the public can believe such outrageous things coming from the left or the right, and they do. People don't have very clear thoughts. What is it? The 11 or 12-year-old mentality dominates among media viewers. And the media even itself is culpable, I think.
Yeah, and there's even an extended, a very large extended conspiracy mythology of the left. It's not just about Trump being the new Hitler or Mussolini. It's not just about Project 2025 and the Heritage Foundation wanting to clean house. It's also this bigger idea that Trump is completely colluding with Vladimir Putin to take over the world. But we just saw a few weeks ago this text by General Kellogg, who was a very important advisor to Trump and who worked in the National Security Council. And Kellogg said, okay, here's how it is. Russia is an enemy. Sometimes the president may say, nicer things or maybe neutral things about the Russians, but that's basically just strategy to keep the diplomatic door open. We want Putin gone. We want to have some more reasonable guys over there in Russia. And look at what the former Trump administration did. It was a very aggressive, very assertive foreign policy against various enemies, including the Russians. And so this has been misrepresented, not just by the left, what the policies actually were, but also even a lot of Trump supporters don't really get it. Some of these MAGA people, they really believe that Trump is completely in bed with Putin and is going to save everything. So even some of the conspiracy activists are deluded about the actual reality of the former Trump admin. So I think that maybe this played a part in this assassination attempt. Maybe this guy actually believed this nonsense, this extended left-wing conspiracy narrative that Trump is totally working with Putin.
Yeah, of course, and Trump supported this bill to reinforce Ukraine, which is completely inconsistent with that. I mean, it was one of the things that was he was saying, look, we have to do this, and enough Republicans got behind it so that it passed. I think that all kinds of people have commented on this before, and we saw witnesses at the scene. We heard some crazy stories from witnesses being all confused, and there was panic, and there was all this other stuff. But I think as the smoke clears, it's going to come down to the fact, and I hope this is what happens, that people talk about this left-wing rhetoric, the lies told about Trump. I mean, I see Trump's faults. I understand his good and bad points. I have questions in my mind about his leadership in the past and going on into the future, but it doesn't include the idea that he's going to create a bloodbath. What really worries me are the communists on the left influencing the left, and the Russian agents on the right influencing people on the right to try to foment a political divide in this country, to try to create a civil war, a real one, and divide us so that Russia and China can take advantage internationally. That is what I see is the real fundamental danger.
Yeah. And isn't this a parallel? Before I forget this point, isn't this another parallel to Oswald? Because when he was a teenager, right? When he was a young guy, Oswald, he was reading all this literature, Marxism, Leninism, so he understood how it was done in Russia even before the October Revolution. All these assassination attempts, trying to kill the leaders, getting the ball rolling. So that was one thing. The other thing is the classic Leninist interpretation. The Leninist interpretation of capitalism, or what they call end-stage or late-stage capitalism. So for more than 100 years, they claimed capitalism is in its end stage and it's devolved into the phase of imperialism. So they think capitalism always fails. It's just cannibalism. And then it just becomes this imperialist nightmare trying to sustain itself, trying to prolong its own life. And so when we look at Kennedy came from a wealthy family. And so this fit into this narrative, right? The leftist narrative. Oh, he's a rich guy and he has rich friends. And so then Kennedy tries to get tough on the Soviets and everything. So, according to the Leninist perspective, that's end-stage capitalism turning into imperialism. And now we have Trump. Trump was a business guy. He's always been a business guy. He's a rich man. He's almost like a caricature to the left because he was so focused on money. And so when we have Project 2025 attached to that, it seems like it seems to confirm the Leninist interpretation, that conspiracy ideology, that this is end-stage capitalism, everything's going downhill, the prices go up, you can't afford a house, blah, blah, blah. And so the next stage would be Trump as a dictator launching senseless wars, trying to prolong capitalism.
Yeah, Yeah, the what really gets confusing, and I'm even confused some of the time when I'm trying to figure out the lies that the Democrats tell, the lies that the Russians and the Chinese are telling, and it's like the behavior of people like Obama and Biden and the Clintons. It's like, is it possible they've had a disagreement with Russia for real? I don't think so. But how do the Russians manage them? How do the Russians manipulate them? Because it isn't. I know from the defector Stanislav Lunev that they don't. That the Russians with their friends in the West who attain high office. There's a difference between an agent and a friend in the parlance of Russian security, Russian intelligence. A friend is someone you treat more like an equal. You don't regard them as an agent.
It's quid pro
And
quo.
they even regard people that don't know they're agents as agents because they can recruit you by manipulating you, and they still call you an agent. You don't know you're an agent, but you're kind of doing whatever they suggest. And in the case of Obama, for example, I've studied Obama's history with the Russians very carefully, and the thing is that there were things that there's two aspects to this relationship in the manipulation. And so I'm trying to interpret Biden's accusations against Trump, whether he really believes it or what the deal is. But with Obama, when he first went to Moscow, he was like an acolyte at the feet of the master when he went to go see then Prime Minister Putin and have breakfast with him. And it's related by Michael McFaul's book, because Michael McFaul was there at that breakfast, that Putin basically launched into an hour plus lecture, which, the president of the United States, Barack Obama, was like this agog student, right?
Yeah.
Worshipping at the feet of and listening to this lecture. And this lecture was, in a way, to make Obama as an American feel guilty for America's behavior and all the wrongs that have been done and what needed to be done. It was kind of a lecture. But at the same time, Putin had to know as a KGB agent that he's talking to someone who was a Marxist scholar, going to Marxist scholar conferences, who was mentored by Frank Marshall Davis, a Communist Party member in Hawaii there when Obama was young, that had been a communist at Occidental, and there's no record of him breaking with communism, so to speak, and having an epiphany saying, oh gosh, communism is wrong. That doesn't appear in Obama's autobiography. In fact, they've kind of smoothed out or erased this communist background of Obama. And so how are they handling Obama? And then, of course, the way when uh, Obama met with Putin in Mexico at this meeting that came next and was kind of treated as a subordinate, treated dismissively. Because when Putin was prime minister, he said, oh, you go talk to Medvedev. You don't talk to me, which
Yeah.
was very dismissive because everybody knew Putin, even though he was prime minister, was the top dog. And there's a story about Dmitry Medvedev, who was then officially president, that his mother had come to Moscow and had lost her way and asked some traveler, this is probably an apocryphal story, but asked some traveler, I'm trying to find my son. He works for Mr. Putin, right? And her son, of course, is president of Russia. But that illustrates the point of the pecking order here. And of course, I think when Biden makes these statements about Trump being uh, causing a bloodbath, and Trump being a Russian puppet. Where's that coming from? I think the Russians have told their friends in the U.S., you have to pretend to be our enemy. And this was the first meeting, I think, where they were told this was when Hillary Clinton was alone in a room for 2 hours with Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, and came out and wouldn't say anything about what happened in that meeting. And there was no translator, there were no witnesses to this meeting, which shouldn't happen. The U.S. Secretary of State shouldn't be meeting alone with a Russian foreign minister without a witness, without a translator.
Yeah.
That shouldn't be, especially
I
when they
mean,
have the background of Hillary Clinton
the
being a radical leftist, right? And so I think in this case, I think there is a kind of instruction to the friends in America, which include Biden, the Clintons, Obama. There's an instruction that you now take this line in talking about Mr. Trump. And that line includes, very stupidly, Biden's doing this, not realizing that he is setting up a situation. Maybe he realizes it.
Yeah.
He's not all
Yeah,
there.
and
That he's setting up a
recently
situation for violence.
and recently when General Kellogg came out with his assessment of the Ukraine war, how it should end, what the deal should be like, and what the Trump foreign policy had been. If you read between the lines, I mean, it becomes clear that some of these statements by Trump, especially on Twitter, and also, some of the contacts that Trump had, that was purely strategical. Because if they have a tough, assertive foreign policy and say tough things all the time, it may not have the desired effect on the Russians, because then the Russians may rally behind Putin because they think there's no diplomatic open door. There's no way of dealing with this stuff peacefully. So this was like an interesting strategy. You have an aggressive foreign policy, but you sort of keep the diplomatic door open. So these Russians think maybe we should get rid of Putin and go back to diplomacy again, right? And so an assassination attempt like this is highly embarrassing for the United States. It's destabilizing. And of course, other countries would benefit from that embarrassment in America and that destabilization. Now, in Russia, they've killed their own people for a long time, and this has been exacerbated since the Ukraine war. So many people dropping dead, drinking the wrong tea, falling out of windows, all that stuff. And the Russians have been killing a bunch of people in Europe. Now, recently, this was in the news a couple of days ago, the Russians apparently wanted to hit the leader of a major German defense company. And so this is the kind of stuff that's going on. This is what the Russians have been doing. And so it's embarrassing for the Russians. They don't look like a stable superpower over there. But now, with this assassination attempt, the United States doesn't seem so stable, because now people are arguing all over America. One person takes this position, the other person takes a completely different position. Everybody hates each other, and by having that division, by having that this split right through the country, this sort of division only benefits the Russians and the Chinese.
Well, here's a subtle point, but it's one that some of my readers have made, and I've been thinking about it for a while. It's that if you look at the rhetoric, both on the right and the left in America, it's like the rhetoric has the structure that the primary enemy of the country is in the Democratic Party, the primary enemy of the country is in the Republican Party. It basically casts a more benign view. The Chinese and Russians are never really talked about in this context as the ultimate source of the problem, of the security problem, and of our internal problem. Because I think people don't realize there's tens of thousands, if not more, of Chinese and Russian and Cuban and North Korean agents, and all these, and Venezuelan, etc., agents in this country. There's all these communist countries, and I consider Russia a communist country because the communist elite was not removed at the end of the Cold War. They're the same families, the same groups still control that country that controlled it when it was the Soviet Union. And Vladimir Putin still has the KGB Soviet mentality. He says he never got rid of his party card. He's even said that publicly. And and though he professes to be a Christian, he says Christianity is the same as Leninism. So what kind of confession is that? Confession of faith. He's a Leninist. So who supports Cuba, who supports Daniel Ortega's communists in Nicaragua, who has troops in communist Venezuela, who's supporting all the communist regimes in Africa, who's allied with Korea and North Korea and China in his war against Ukraine. So it's to me, but what's interesting is that none of this domestic rhetoric in America creates that proper context of it's China and Russia stupid, it's the communist bloc stupid. And anybody like a useful idiot like Tucker Carlson is taking the Russian line. He embarrassed himself by being a regular stooge, going and interviewing Putin, and of course a stooge interviewing Orban in Hungary. These are, Orban is basically the main position Russia has in NATO.
Yeah.
So in order for Tucker Carlson to be such an idiot, and Scott Ritter and and Colonel Douglas McGregor, these idiots, these useful idiots on the right, and then all the useful idiots on the left,
Yeah.
like Biden himself.
I mean, even Kellogg said that. General Kellogg said that in his text, and I think it was in April. He said it was great to have a president like Trump who is so hard to read from the outside because he seems unpredictable, and sometimes
Yes, he is.
he may appear to send mixed signals, like super tough foreign policy, but then some statements about the Russians, right? So it was a perfect situation
Yeah,
where
I
they
mean, for
kept the
example,
Russians guessing.
threatening little rocket man, and taking huge criticism, then sitting down, the first American
Yeah,
president to meet a North Korean leader, and then just walking away, giving him nothing, leaving him with nothing, so that he
yeah.
actually executed some of his top diplomats. But
Yeah, I mean, we and
not funny for
it's just
them.
this
But
usual Trump style that he's over the top, and it seems like he does have to be brought down a little bit, brought down a notch, shift into a lower gear maybe. That was kind of the impression that people got, and that made it made it much easier to conduct foreign policy if people couldn't really figure out that Trump phenomenon. And I mean, he did this thing when he was shot. He was giving he was punching his fist into the air, and he was creating probably one of the greatest photos in recent history, right? You saw the photos, the still photos, that the
oh yeah,
blood in
he's
his
got blood on his face from
blood on his face,
where the
the
bullet
look on his
grazed
face.
his head. He had
Yeah,
blood had been trickling down the front of his face because he had gone down under the podium. I mean,
yeah,
this is very dramatic, obviously, and of course, it's going to, it's going to, it's interesting, since the disaster over Biden's, mental state. There were polls showing that Trump was gaining, but then all these mainstream media polls showing, oh no, there's been no change, there's been no gain. And now with this, it's going to be interesting. How are they going to not report what's really happening in the movement in the public? Because there's going to be movement towards Trump now. Because Trump, this is rather heroic to be up there, to get shot, to show defiance, to not be intimidated. Look, Americans like this. It's very masculine. We've got too much. We've got
yeah,
too much estrogen going around the men these days. There's a need of more testosterone, and he showed it.
yeah. And there's another thing here. I have this quote here, or this note here. It says Robert Pape, political scientist, University of Chicago, conducted a national poll last month. It found that 10% of respondents said the use of violence to prevent Donald Trump from becoming president is justified. A third of respondents also said they owned a gun. Now, usually people in America, especially when they've had like 2 beers, 3 beers, they start to say things they wouldn't say in public, maybe, right? That the leftists, right-wing people, they may say some stupid stuff. But here's the big problem. If you have a staggering number of people in America saying stupid stuff like this and maybe post stuff like this online, this makes it harder and harder for Homeland Security and the FBI to figure out who is the real threat, right? Because there's too much chatter, there's too much talking, there's too many people saying dumb things. How do you distinguish between the real threat, like this kid, or just some guy, just blowing off steam, right?
Well, what we're going to hear, and it's already been talked about by a few people, that the head of Trump's security detail is, I believe, if what I read was true, is a woman, that she is maybe, politically correct, that she's maybe picked security detail not based on qualifications, but based on race and gender. Maybe, I mean, I've heard this accusation by a person who's usually well informed has made this statement. I'm not going to say who it is, but if this comes out to be true too, because again, this was not a competent security detail for a president. Because obviously a guy climbed up on a roof within 130 yards and fired some rounds, almost killing Trump. So the question of the increasing incompetence, I mean, in a way, I have said, and one of my readers has pointed out to me this morning, that I have talked about how everything's falling apart. how there's been an assault on order in society, in ordered thought, in on reason. There's been an assault on the family, on the individual, on the proper way to run a government, and what is right and wrong, and what the proper use of things are. We've got such anarchy in our thinking, and such muddled notions coming from the destroyers of the would-be destroyers of society, who think they can create a new and better society, that things are indeed falling apart, that things are indeed getting worse. And this trend has to reverse at some point. It will. But how much damage and how much loss and how much disintegration of civilization is there going to have to be before that happens? And of course, I fault. I don't. We all are participants in this lack of discipline and this lack of proper care. In just in general, in the way we live.
Yeah.
And
I
I
mean,
think this is a problem.
with the media, I mean, there's different kinds of media, and there's different kinds of mainstream media, there's different kinds of alternative media. And as we have established, even in the past, they will pick a narrative that suits their purposes, and then they will go in that direction and use everything that fits the narrative, and they will disregard anything else that doesn't fit their narrative. And so I see quite a few influencers. They pretend to be pro-America, they pretend to be patriotic, but they're very, very much pro-Russia. And so what are these people now going to say? Are they going to be blabbing about some sort of deep state, which they never can really proper define? Will they say that this deep state, well, they're already saying it, that this woozy deep state was behind this, but we've seen these influencers even attack high-ranking Republicans when they don't like them, or when these Republicans do something they don't like, they don't agree with. There have been people entering and leaving the old Trump administration, and of course there's always arguments, of course there's different styles, and sometimes somebody did something which the influencers didn't like, and they would immediately claim this Republican guy is a secret member of the deep state. He's part of the conspiracy. He tried to stop Trump. He tried to stop the agenda. We need to hate this guy. So, I mean, there's some really weird people out there who masquerade as these patriotic Americans, but they seem to be doing all the wrong things.
Well, there's a lot of paranoia and confusion. Look, I've had my own readers now, people saying, "Oh, it's obvious that he was hired by the deep state, or he was hired by the communists, or the communists were behind this." No, there's no evidence of that at all. This is just a poor, confused kid who tried to shoot the president, and that's what it looks like to me right now. Unless there's evidence to show more, the very slovenliness of the assassination attempt and the slovenliness of the president's security detail is the best explanation, because as Ortega y Gasset said about Spain before the Spanish Civil War, Spain is slovenly. The students are slovenly towards the teachers are slovenly towards the students, the citizens are slovenly toward the government, and the government toward the people. I mean, it's slovenliness. And I have to say that this is we are disintegrating in that same direction. And if people talk about, if we have a civil war in this country, there'll be the ideological usuals, but it'll be slovenliness at the bottom of it. Because if people were thinking properly, if they were sharp, if they understood the way they should feel and what their real obligations are, we wouldn't be drifting in this direction, and we wouldn't be allowing some agents of some foreign powers to manipulate us and to manipulate our leaders and corrupt them in broad daylight. We would have prosecutions. We would have real investigations. We would have real investigative journalists. Look at who the most slovenly is: the journalists, the TV journalists, and the print journalists. They're slovenly.
I mean, these people. If Trump was now dead, I mean, Nikki Haley could beat Biden in the election with more than 10 points. Easy. She could, Nikki Haley could beat Biden any day of the week. So by doing something like this, you don't change the system. You don't really you don't really take out that one person who's behind it all, who's leading everything, right? Because
Yeah,
a
because the
republic a
president doesn't
republic
in
is a system.
America.
A
Yeah,
republic is a system, and it
a
has
system. Yeah.
redundancy. It has redundancy.
And the president has limited power. He has to govern with a bureaucracy that opposes. If Trump is president again, the bureaucracy is going to be against him like it was before. He's going to have people in his own circle undermining him. He's got all the Democrats in opposition to him. I mean, he's not a dictator. He can't get away with anything. You can't in this country unless you've got this giant media juggernaut behind you and you control both houses of Congress and the whole security establishment and the top generals are behind you. Then you could, which is, by the way, the only danger of that happening is coming from the left, by
I
the
mean,
way.
I'm getting RAF vibes here. This was the old left wing terror organization in Germany that was pretty big in the 60s
Not the
and
Royal
70s.
Air Force, RAF,
It's
the
the
Red
Rote
Army faction.
exactly.
Right?
And so they were pretty big back in the day, and they had a string of high-profile terror attacks, assassinations. They shot people on the street, high-ranking people. They abducted people, stuffed them into the trunk of their car, having mock trials on camera, that sort of stuff. They hijacked airplanes and demanded that their comrades be freed from prison. They would actually try to extort the government. Let our people go from prison or else, right? So maybe it goes in this direction. We'll see in the coming days and weeks. Maybe there's a campaign coming like this. Because you had the weathermen. I mean, the Americans, they had the weathermen underground, and these weirdo ideological people. Like, what was the guy you mentioned? Bernardine, or these people, Bernardine Dorn and Ayers, I think.
Yeah, Bill Ayers and Bernardine Dorn were the Weather Underground Marxist-Leninist terrorists who blew up things and killed policemen and other people, and somehow didn't end up in prison for the rest of their lives. Don't know how. But you see, we if they had been neo-Nazis or on the right, they would be in prison their whole lives. But as they are communists, they get different treatment.
I mean, and this is kind of the left-wing version, I think, of the Turner Diaries. If people remember that was a crazy novel. It's called the Turner Diaries. It's about right-wingers committing terror attacks in order to destabilize the country, to provoke a reaction. And so everybody is committing atrocities, and then it comes, a civil war happens, and ultimately the right wing wins that civil war. Now, that's a very baseline terrorism strategy, and the left may also have adopted a strategy like this because it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Some 20-year-old shoots at the president, and so that gets things rolling. And of course, if a Republican becomes a president, either Trump, or if Trump was now dead, would be somebody else from the Republicans. If you have a Republican president and they implement Project 2025, and more left-wing attacks happen, of course the government would be forced to have more surveillance and to arrest people and to investigate and get tough. And that would trigger all of the left, because they think, well, this is exactly what the left has been warning about, that there's this right-wing dictatorship coming. So they think they are validated. They think their ideas are being confirmed. So the left will go even harder at this. So maybe that's kind of the strategy.
We have to be worried a little bit here, too, about the paranoia of the right, about them misreading this assassination attempt on Trump and going overboard in blaming the wrong people, in claiming a conspiracy, claiming that the administration hired this guy.
The Jewish conspiracy, all of the Jewish conspiracy thing.
The deep state, the Jews, the banksters. Watch what happens. I imagine Alex Jones is going to be interesting. I think he's probably, I haven't seen, but he's probably claiming a conspiracy already, right?
Well, yeah, of course. I mean, they've even prepared this in the previous years, because they always talk about this could happen and that could happen and anything could happen. And when something happens,
way they have predicted it, right?
Yeah, then they say we predicted it. But I mean, Alex Jones is like the proverbial broken clock that tells the time correctly twice a day, right? Because he's announcing everything, he's predicting everything, and something in some way of shape or form will actually then happen. So I've seen this
The
over
little
the years.
hand is on
Yeah.
the Rothschilds, and the big hand is on the Rockefellers,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. And so in the previous years, I mean, since the Trump era, like 2016 roundabout, there has been all this talk among conspiracy influencers, and they draw these weird comparisons between cases they don't really understand or they misrepresent. So they will say that Abraham Lincoln was shot by the Illuminati because Lincoln was about to fight the Illuminati, especially the banking system or the money system. And there have been so many misrepresentations about the whole Lincoln thing. Then it is claimed that Kennedy was doing the same thing. Kennedy was fighting the Illuminati. He gave that speech, which was really about communism, but they say it was about the Illuminati. So he declared war against the Illuminati, and he wanted to destroy the central bank, which Kennedy didn't want to do. There was an executive order about silver coins, and that has been misconstrued in an attack on the Federal Reserve System. So they say the Jewish conspiracy killed Kennedy because he wanted to go to war against them. So you got the Lincoln thing, the Kennedy thing, and now Trump. And Trump wanted to, smash the conspiracy. Trump wanted to destroy the Illuminati, and that's why the Illuminati killed him. So it's just, it goes on and on and on. They will misrepresent all these different cases and then link them together and say, see, there's a pattern here.
Yeah, and that's the thing that I'm afraid of seeing, this kind of hysteria going even more further, and I hope that it will be constrained. I hope it'll be responsible. But people get addicted. It's like a drug to these conspiracy narratives because they're titillating and they're self-affirming. See, my views are right. See, there is this conspiracy. See, this is proof, and they're pointing to things that aren't proof of anything. But you see, it's all in the eye of the beholder who already believes. So that is a problem. We have limited time today, so maybe I'm going to make a final comment. Maybe you can make a final comment, Alex. My final comment on this is that what to look for in the future. The Republican convention is now coming, is fast upon us. The Democratic convention next week, and I think in a way the media was sort of taking the wind out of that convention, making it all about Biden and Biden's struggle to hold on to his office against people who want to supplant him. But now that has been completely eclipsed. We go into the Republican convention with a really powerful, renewed interest, a fascination now, because this near assassination attempt has given Trump the aura of he's not only been attacked legally and has survived massive legal assaults, he's now survived a physical assault, which almost gives him the aura of providential protection. Famously, I don't know if you know this, in American history, George Washington is the guy that had bullets going by him. Even in the French and Indian War, he should have been killed, and
Nothing
it's like
hit him,
this Indian chieftain called him unkillable. And he's a big guy, he's a big target. Bullets should find him easier. But there were, after one of his battles, he had, I don't remember how many bullet holes in his coat, which is draped around him. So these bullets are grazing him and going through his coat. So this is the unkillable, the man of destiny, the man of providence. This is sort of built into the American myth. And now the little bit of this rubs off on Trump going into his convention. This is really powerful. This now it starts to eclipse and make the Democrats look more tawdry than ever. So your comment.
Well, I would recommend that people check out a show that I recently recorded just a few days ago with Nevin Gussick. The show is called Wilderness of Mirrors. I'm not aware if this is up yet or it will be up in the next few hours. And we talk about Project 2025, which is a big plan of the Heritage Foundation. Just like they've done with the old Reagan administration, they have all these ideas and they just presented those ideas, and this will become the agenda of the Republican Party. And that may have triggered the shooter additionally, because it's not just about Trump, it's about all these other people. And if you just read Project 2025, you could call it anti-communism, right? I mean, you could just read everything and say, call it anti-communism and call it a day. But of course, you have to look a bit deeper, because in the past, these plans also had been drawn up, and it was never enough to get a majority. It was always this 50-50 equilibrium. So something was going wrong. Something was not good enough, and we have to pinpoint what needs to be done better. The major infiltration problem of the past, how are we going to solve that now? We can't just have nice sounding ideas and be content with that. So I would recommend that people check out Wilderness of Mirrors and listen to what we're saying about Project 2025, because they want to clean house. They want to clean the government apparatus. They want to get rid of all the leftist wokies. They want to make the intelligence community stronger. They want a traditional way of handling intelligence. What people you recruit. They want more foreign assets, more language skills to push back against China and Russia. And none of that stuff that we've seen from especially the Democrats, where they turn the intelligence community woke. There's a lot of good stuff in Project 2025, but it has to be done better. We need to do better than we've seen in the past, or else we get the same result. It's this 50-50 equilibrium, and everybody's just going crazy.
Well, that's it. So pay attention to that Wilderness of Mirrors broadcast. My website is jrnyquist.blog, and I've got an essay up there, rather extensive one. And I want to thank the listeners for being with us this hour. And we've been discussing the assassination attempt on President Trump. And we hope you'll join us next time when we meet again.